Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hiya.
It's
Hello,
late
Helen.
night mess. We should
Hello,
have like
Artie.
late night music, like smooth jazz.
Yeah. I actually did have some nice music on in the background, but I've had to turn it on to listen to the horrible cacophony of your voices. It's been a lovely evening up until now. No, I'm only
Yeah, and
joking.
I've just been at a barbecue at the neighbours, and I'm
I
like,
know.
"Oh, sorry, I gotta go. I'm doing a podcast," and they're like, "Really?"
Yeah,
And I'm like, "Yeah."
I was saying to Helen, but she didn't laugh. It's like a bit like being a superhero, isn't it? You have a kind of normal everyday personality, and then you go off and do a podcast where you're giving it to the troons.
I
I
don't even know what my own name is half the time. When my real life friends call me by my real name, I'm like, "How did you know? Wait a minute, who's around?"
Yeah,
Oh, it's
but
been an odd few years, hasn't it? Like that.
it's
How how all of this has suddenly happened. This ridiculous thing that we're having to do. This
I know,
ridiculous
yeah.
stuff that we're having to talk about. That we're really actually having to entertain the idea that if a lesbian says, "I don't like penis," people will actually say, oh, "hate speech," and you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
"How?
It's
What?"
Yeah.
it's been extraordinary, and for expressing these perfectly commonplace, normal opinions, we've been left to the mercies of frankly, lunatics like Aidan Comerford, who is the person who got our guest, or well, not no, actually, not sure he got her kicked off, but. I think it was dealing with him that radicalized her because, as we know,
Mm.
he's a dreadful human being. But she'll be speaking to us later. This is Edie, who's you may have known recently got kicked off Twitter. She'll be joining us later. And I did ask a few other people who've been kicked off whether they might be able to join us and make it a kind of special, people are being silenced type episode. So we'll see. Yes. Well, what an exciting week it's been again.
Yeah.
It just never stops. It never
It
stops.
doesn't. It hasn't stopped now, has it? I think, like I was saying, so I've been on holiday and I've had sort of personal issues to deal with, so I haven't really been on Twitter that much. But for the last few days, at the end of my holiday and sort of travelling back, I've been just sort of twittering away, and it's amazing to me now how many women and increasingly men, thank you, but huge numbers of women are just saying, "I've had enough of this. No." And
Yeah.
and it was a really interesting thing that somebody said today, which was in conjunction with somebody saying, "I've been asked for my pronouns. What I was a little bit flustered. What would you say?" And I, kind of almost sort of tongue in cheek, have this long spiel where you say, "Oh, I'm afraid I refuse to participate in a ritual that both legitimizes and furthers the reach of an ideology that is extremely hostile to the idea of women's boundaries." And it's ridiculous because it's so long-winded,
But
but
did
it's
that just come
actually
off the tip of your tongue? It's very
no.
good.
I've it's been something that
It's
it's
been sitting there.
it's
Yeah,
been
yeah,
looked at and considered.
yeah.
But I started it off with, "I'm afraid," and somebody said, "That's great." But as my great aunt, somebody used to say to me, "If you're not afraid, don't start with 'I'm afraid." And I thought, fucking right, I'm not afraid. So I've changed it to, "I refuse to
Yeah.
participate." Not, "I'm afraid that I refuse." I just refused.
Yes.
And another woman said, I would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, but," and now I'm not sorry. I'm saying no. I'm
Yeah.
simply saying no. And I've seen, like, I've had loads of, the usual trolls just saying, "Oh, you're obsessed with penis, you're penis obsessed, you're hateful, blah, blah, blah." But there's so many more women just standing up and saying, "No,
Yeah.
I'm not having this." I
Yeah.
am simply saying, "No, no, no." Women are allowed to say no, and women are allowed to say no without unapologetically, without having to say, "Oh, but, obviously trans rights are human." No,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
Just soon you'll be like Chris O'Dowd in the IT crowd. You'll just have a big T-shirt that says "No."
No. Oh,
Just point to the
Artie, that's
shirt. No.
perfect, isn't it?
Hey, though, Artie, is Helen getting a bit shrill, do you think?
No!
Yeah, we're gonna bring back some sexist tropes, you guys. Now that you've won this battle,
Is she getting a bit hysterical? No, absolutely. I think
totally kidding. Lovely. I've got wine this time because it's later, and I'm so used to morning shows. For me, it's not. It's a little early in the day for me, so it's 4. But for once, I'm gonna have a little bit of wine. It's been a while.
Yeah, you can have wine.
Artie, let me. I'm having a tiny little thing, but I'm a little bit worried it's going to knock me unconscious because I didn't sleep last night. But hopefully I'll be able to soldier on. But Artie, how's it feeling in Canada now amongst friends and people you're speaking to online? And I mean, for instance, I noticed a story that there's been questions about the gender affirming surgery in a Canadian hospital. Is that right?
There's more chatter. There's a little bit more. It's slow going, but there's a little more chatter in the press. We've got a couple of pieces. I was not responsible for these pieces in any way, but the Canadian center right newspaper covered ran a couple pieces that were very good. People on the ground are a lot more, I just sense it. The friends that I have that I try not to talk about this issue around. I can at least share with everyone I'm still friends with that I am gender critical, and I can mention it a little bit. I was visiting a friend and her baby and some of my family heterosexual friends with families and babies yesterday, and I mentioned offhand something, and Megan Murphy's name came up, and nobody screamed and yelled.
Oh, good.
And I was like, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
I wonder whether, there's so many interesting things happening. Like, for instance, the coverage that the BBC gave the lesbians at Pride was so extraordinarily one-sided that I think they're going to have to address it, because it was shocking, a shocking piece of propaganda about what happened.
About gay people, about lesbians, homosexuals at a Pride march. And, there was a gentleman in Manchester who, it's my understanding he was kind of there to protest. But gay people are allowed to protest, you would think, at a gay Pride event. And he was just dragged away forcefully and prevented from. I think Manchester gates off their Pride areas, and you literally need permission to get into them. So we're literally being told we're not allowed, and we're being told by the police we can't come in. And when we do come in, we get dragged out. It's just horrible. By we, I mean homosexuals, but it's mostly lesbians, of course, facing this. And we should be clear about that. There are some gay men too.
Yeah.
Well, there are. But the whole lesbian thing in Cardiff was really, it's almost, I know what I've said this before, but it's almost like that there's this huge sort of virus going around where everyone's like nodding along, and some people aren't getting it. We've got this. We've got the immune.
Yes.
And we're looking around, and we're like, why is everyone nodding along to lesbians being told like we're going to hoik you out of Pride because you're same-sex attracted? And we're all like, hang on, this is Pride. Like, this literally is the point of Pride. But most people are like, yes, get rid of the noisy bitches. And
yes.
What? But how are we here? I mean, I know that we know how we're here, but even though we've seen the fight happening, we're looking at it and we're like, how?
It's heartening that there are so many more people speaking up, and it's just so ridiculous. I think I also heard that there were like planes flying overhead in Wales with like smoke trails of the trans colors. Is that not true?
No, that's the traditional RAF colors for those.
Oh, okay. So I heard it. That was wrong. I'm glad we got that out there so that we can address it. But still, just the idea, like the visuals.
But you know what? But Artie, it's a great point, because may I just say this, right? Because it is the kind of thing that when you're looking at all this propaganda, like the huge Nazi-like flags and banners hanging outside Leeds University,
you start to wonder. You
start to wonder. You start to go, oh my God, is this, what the fuck is going on? In the States, I just posted something about a drag queen story hour that was being monitored by people with guns. People with guns were guarding it. So this is like queer theory at the end of at the end of a barrel, you know?
Yeah, well, I'm really happy that the people are speaking up more. That there's just the visual imagery of this is so outrageous now. They're really reaching that critical mass. But I'm also still despondent that there's so much nonsense. You know, I find myself taking stock still every day. Like, did I make the right decision to start speaking out about this? Did I make the right decision to start going online? It's turned my life upside down. It's made me unemployable, and there just doesn't seem to be any end in sight. Have I made the right decision? My conscience says, of course I did. I will never stop fighting for what's right. But it just makes me so in despair that there's such a massive. It just feels like the whole world has been taken over by body snatchers, and there's only like 2 people left. Let
me may I add something to that? I've had this strange relationship with all these people I used to know in comedy, and I still know some of them. I still consider friends. Some of them I don't call because I don't know whether they understand this issue, and they'll call me a bigot down the phone. But you know, like I gave up. I've tried many times, but I have had to give up asking people to help because I really have come just short of begging people, you know. And what I really would like to get across to everybody who may be watching this, who is in some, I don't know, celebrity field or something to do with kids or anything that might make their contribution valuable. But basically, the problem with this whole thing is that it's very fashionable. It's just fashion. It's pure fashion.
It's literally fashion. Have you heard about there's a fashion label called Trans little star, and the child, they've got like a child fashion runway model who's a trans kid.
Yes.
It's like biological mother and her partner are both trans identified, and it's like really, and then they have another child who they call non-binary. Like really.
Wow.
You know, it's just so
it's interesting because I had and this is one of the things that heartened me actually. A chap just yesterday was really like getting really angry, and you know, his opening gambit was, "You're a hateful, horrible woman." You know, sometimes you get people who build up to it, and sometimes people just come in quite shockingly, and you're like, really, honestly, you know, how is this helpful to either, you know, how is it helpful to you to just come in and say you're a horrible bigot hater, and then it turns out trans child. But what was really interesting amongst all the interesting things was he said, my trans daughter and her trans friends are really frightened of you. They're frightened and it's your fault. And you're like, how many fucking trans kids do you know?
I know. Do you need Aaron Brockovich to come to your town and test the water? If there's that many trans people in one area.
Yeah, but it's, you know, it's not a social contagion, but honest to fucking God, how can you be typing, my trans daughter and her trans friends are really frightened because you've frightened the shit out of them, you bigoted woman. Like, how are you not typing this and thinking, oh, hang on.
There's never any joined up thinking. They will have that argument with you, have that conversation with you, and then they will swear blind that there's no such thing as ROGD. I mean, it's
and they will
ridiculous.
also swear blind that it's your fault. It's your fault. And I'm like, well, you know, honestly, if women saying no is frightening your son, I can say it here because it's not Twitter, it's frightening your son, then maybe you've done a really shit job of bringing him up. You know, if women saying no is frightening your son, then honest to fucking God, get your acts together, all of you. No, I mean, seriously, I can be as polite as possible on Twitter because I have to be. But the reality of it is get your fucking acts together. Stop blaming women, for Christ's sake. You know,
it's funny, isn't it? But as you said, Artie, the kind of oh no, it was you, Helen. Sorry. The vast majority of these people have some sort of Stockholm syndrome relationship with someone in their life. They have basically been fed all the lines from Tumblr, all the lies about suicide statistics, all the lies about puberty blockers being reversible, and they, they're just locked in this relationship with someone who's just feeding them a whole line of bullshit.
Yeah, and and they are almost the worst demographic, aren't they? The parents of the trans kids, the ones who have
they're the most vicious.
All out. Because they have such a lot. They can't go back. They can't go back. Susie Green has made it her mission to trans as many kids as she possibly can in order to justify her stance. And then you've got Jo Morn, who was completely reasonable on this until there was a trans kid in his family, and then there was somebody calling themselves trans mum who was like vicious as all fuck. And
Joanne Harris is an absolute
everything. They're so invested in it that they have to. It's not just for their kids, and people who do everything for their kids.
It's kind of psychic self-defense, isn't it? Yeah.
And they're almost that, that sort of stealth lot that we weren't necessarily fighting, because we were like, well, you can understand the issues, blah blah, you sort of kind and nice, but they're almost the worst ones. Because one of the people we've been talking about. Sorry, Helen, cut right. No, because they cannot turn back. Yeah. They cannot turn back.
Well, and the other reason is not just because of the harm they've done to their kids. Now, I'm not saying which, I'm saying certain specific people that I haven't mentioned, but definitely some harm has been done to some people's kids. But it's not just that; it's everything else they've done in its name. Yeah. They have just been sending abuse. Joanne Harris's behavior at the Society of Authors is absolutely disgusting.
And she has a child. Her daughter, her biological female child, is identifying as an ROGD girl, isn't she? Something like that.
I believe that, but it's basically a straight woman who thinks that she's the opposite sex. It's just like heartbreaking.
It seems to be the loss of all professionalism, of all perspective.
Here's the thing, Helen.
I would say anything and everything in order to carry on. This is not reasonable.
Yeah. But my theory on that is that, like, because of the complete inversion of the truth that trans women are women is basically a contradictory. It doesn't make sense. It's saying men are women, males are female. Yeah. That's what it says. Males are female, trans women are women. So when you build a whole ideology based on one thing that's an absolute inversion of the truth, turns out the result is no one can do their jobs. Comedians are getting cancelled from Edinburgh, like Jerry Sadowitz.
That's right. Yeah.
How long has he been doing? How long has he been? He's been an absolute, fucking fixture at Edinburgh for the last however many years, and it took this generation of authoritarian brats to ban him. How about journalists who call rapists and pedophiles they're like directly lying to their readers. They can't do their jobs. Like the equal treatment bench book, makes it difficult for judges to do their jobs because they have to juggle the bullshit of observing these people's pronouns while dealing with rapists. It's just fucking it blows my mind.
And it's not helping. Everybody is trying to be nice, and this isn't being nice. I had a wonderful chat with Dr. Az Hakim on my channel recently, and he's worked with a lot of transition regretters. He's been involved for 2 decades.
And let's just say, as Hakim has been in this as a thoughtful, reasonable therapist for 20 years. Really, he's got so much experience. Yeah. And he is so kind and thoughtful. He's so brilliant to listen to.
But what these regretters say is that there's this moment of terror when they realize the transition wasn't right for them, and then they go to everyone around them. I just needed to be told some basic things so that I could sort this out, is what they say. I had made a mistake. I wasn't thinking this through, and I should have been told before I transitioned. Why didn't you tell me? And everybody says, well, I was just being nice. I could see you were in a bad state of mind. You weren't in a good place, and I was just trying to be nice to you. So I just rushed you. I ushered you along. into this disastrous decision. And then everybody says the same thing. This is what happened to my friend who had autogynephilia and who had the vaginoplasty and then subsequently fell apart and committed suicide. It was exactly that. Everybody's just being nice. Everybody's just like, this is what you're supposed to do. This is somebody who's confused and troubled and doesn't understand things. And that's like that. He'd still be alive if someone had sat him down and explained to him what was going on in his mind and, told him that, and introduced him to some detransitioners, introduced him to some regretters, introduced him to some people who could help him understand what he's going through so he could contextualize it properly, and then he'd still be alive. So being nice, ushering people essentially to destroying their lives, that's ridiculous. That's absolute cowardice, It makes me think of these trolley experiments, these psychological experiments where, you pull the lever and the trolley runs over one person, or if you leave the lever alone, it runs over 5 people. And the idea that if you just do nothing, 5 more people die than if you do something, but at least you don't feel like it's your personal responsibility. And there's something going on like that where people have the opportunity to intervene in people's lives who are suffering from gender dysphoria. And they know they have a responsibility to, but it feels more comforting to them to just be nice and let the identifying dysphoric person, go further and further into transition on their own because they don't want to take that moral responsibility. And that seems like all of society is in the trolley, has access to the switch that can turn the switch, that can divert all of these people away from getting these surgeries and all of this terrible stuff happening, but they just feel like it's someone else's responsibility and they'd rather just be nice,
But there's also that, and that is definitely there for medical professionals who can see it. But then you've got the wider society, haven't you, who are waking up definitely to the issues, definitely with sports. They're seeing it, no debate, definitely over. Everyone knows what we're talking about when we're talking about it. But I still think that the actual medicalization part of it has really been obscured. I don't think the wider public has any idea about these poor girls who are getting the whole of their forearms basically ripped off down to the bone.
Have you seen the latest photos?
The society has no idea about that.
Because
if they did, they'd be like,
it's a problem it's a problem that I have with my site. I would like to, when people say gender affirming surgeries, I'd love to show people these 4 photographs that are like looking into hell.
Yes.
The horrifying stump that's sewn back on from the skin of the forearm. Like I have these pictures, but I don't want to put that on my Substack and have my Substack banned all over the place. It's so grotesque and so horrible. But how do you get the word out? How do you tell people? How do you? It is.
And what's really interesting is that you're wondering how to tell because you also have compassion to people that this has happened to, and you don't want to sort of hold them up as sort of grotesque sort of examples.
Yes.
You want to be thoughtful and kind about it, but it makes it difficult to get it out there. And you see anyone who posts photos of the girls with the double mastectomies, trans activists immediately report them saying, "Oh, look, you're posting nudes of underage kids. Oh my God, you're so terrible." Yeah. And you're like, it's a despicable way of silencing, of making your argument. You don't seem to care about what's happening. It's simply about what can I use to silence you so that I can further the reach of this ideology that is so terrible for children. And there is no question in my mind. I mean, I'm very open to having my mind changed, and I will listen to things. But it's been very clear now. I've seen too much to ever think that there's a point where I'd be like, "Oh no, actually, the skinning the forearms and things was great because those penises that they've created really, really do work, and it does make them men." It's gone beyond that, and people do need to know what's going on. And it's
They
really
do.
difficult.
You know, Tim
Get it
Burton made
out
a
there.
movie called Frankenweenie, but I don't think he had any idea that that term is going to have an entirely different.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, it
dark,
really
I know.
does.
I'm trying to make
It,
light of it, but
but it really does
And
look
it
look
is
like
because it is
something.
really sad, isn't it? It is
It's like
really
something
sad
from
for
the
girls.
film Saw.
But
It's
it's
like
terrible
something
for the
from
girls that this
Saw.
has happened to, and you really
I
don't
know.
want to hold them up and say, "Look how terrible this is."
Yeah.
Despite the fact that it is terrible. But even, I mean, there was that huge article, was it in the Atlantic, about that poor woman who was obviously so mentally distressed and needing this massive penis, and the whole thing was about that. And she was so obviously in mental anguish. And yet
Yeah.
this thing was run as some sort of celebration. And it was terrible.
Well,
But
Malcolm Clark says it's the only area of medicine where the idea of cutting something off to solve the problem still persists. You know, the people had it with their legs, with their arms. They would take
their eyes, yeah.
with their eyes. Shit.
Yeah, some people want to be blind. They think they should be blind. Yeah, so
Yeah. And I remember. I mean, it always, again, it's a very dark laugh, but I always remember, like, the author telling me about the video, because we saw Malcolm's documentary years and years ago. Our author saw it, and he said, well, you know, it was this guy, and he just desperately wanted to get his legs cut off, and then when he got his legs cut off, he was like, I shouldn't have done that.
That didn't do it. That didn't. Yeah, that thing, that need
you know
to
what I
get
mean?
this thing done. It doesn't. That need is what you need to address, not the actual. You need to address the need by figuring out why you want that, why you have that need, not by satisfying that need. And that's the thing with trans, is like the desire to not be the sex that you are, or to be the other sex. You should be addressing the why of that instead of the how you can accomplish it, because you can't accomplish it. You know. Yeah.
So Edie is here, so she had to get up very early in Australia, so perhaps I should bring her in now. Edie, hello, how's it going?
Hi guys, well, how are you going? Hello, fellow haters.
Is that have I pronounced your name right? Is it Edie? Or
yeah,
Eddie?
Edie's right. Yeah.
Okay.
What time is it there where you are?
It's just gone. It's almost 6:30. Yeah, which is very
in
early
the morning.
I'm a night person.
We only ever see Australian people in a kind of gloom that's completely unrepresentative of the country you live in.
Because of the time zones.
Well,
it's
the
like
sun's
always
coming
dark.
up here, but I've closed the curtain because I thought once it comes up, it's going to be too bright. And at my age, we don't need too much.
you don't know. I'm looking at myself and I'm thinking, why have I got the lights on?
So Edie, you recently were another victim of Twitter's 7 or 8 year war on women. That's been going on ever since they got rid of people like Posey Parker and Megan Murphy. Stuart Campbell, of course, of Wings of Scotland, Holly Lawford Smith. All of these people have gone before you. What was your crime? What do you think brought their spotlight down onto you?
Well, the tweet in the end was about lesbians. I think I put it out everywhere that men pretending to be lesbians is rape culture. But I think a lot of my mates thought I was becoming not so much more active, because I was pretty addicted to Twitter, honestly. But the Australian community is peaking. I've never seen so much action on the Australian scene as I've seen lately. And I was starting to get engaged in spaces. I was talking about which I am still talking about, getting a book club organised and trying to get the women together and listening to women. I was really starting to listen to what the women were saying about how they were feeling in their workplaces. Women with these little avatars secretly coming on saying, there's this guy in my office and he's trans, and now he's in my bathrooms, he's all over my life. We're going to these seminars, and these women are just trying to get on with their lives. And this shit is turning up in their workplaces, in their swimming pools, everywhere. They're trying to run the life that women live, regular women trying to look after their kids, trying to think before they go to a place. Now, do I have to use the toilets? How are we going to be able to cover the kids? All that shit that women don't need in their lives. Women have complicated lives anyways. So all of a sudden we've got all these women And I suspect maybe that flagged my account because I hadn't really seen a lot of, I mean, I'm pretty rude. I'm not like Helen. I can't say I was very nice and mild and sweet all the time because people would know that I'm a liar. But I mean, I was never intentionally cruel to people. And certainly the people I was interacting with that day, you know, one was claiming to be a lesbian. It might have been a female person, but, you know, it's unlikely. Yeah.
But you weren't saying anything about that particular person themselves, right? You were just
No.
saying in general that you know, lesbians don't do dick, and it's rape culture to suggest otherwise.
Yes.
Honestly, the things that women get banned for are insane. You know, the stuff that we have to put up with. I spend my days having to fight off people who are deliberately, cruelly insulting and unpleasant, and I just have to be polite and nice and reasonable because I know that Twitter will ban me.
Yeah.
It's, you know, and honestly,
you have to curtsy.
The stuff that I want to say. Stuff that I want to say. So, Edie, I have a huge amount of sympathy for you because, you know, as soon as your account is targeted, which I suspect that yours suddenly was, they will get you for the mildest thing.
And may I say as well, you know, I think sometimes people, like I heard that too, that before I left Twitter, I'd become, you know, aggressive and all this sort of stuff. And yeah, there was a bit of me that was completely confused and battered about by the fact that no one was helping. No one saw what was going on. And sure, my frustration raised to a pitch sometimes where I might express myself badly or been rude or something like that. But here's the thing: we're allowed to be rude. It's not against the law to be rude. It's only feminists or feminist allies who are banned for being rude. You know, it's an interesting.
Oh, we're hateful, aren't we?
Yeah.
Totally.
Edie, when did you? How did you peak? What made you realize that something odd was going on?
Well, I'd kind of been moving away from the left. I'm from a traditional working class left background. I did a degree in cultural political theory. So, but I was running my life, you know. I was always interested in politics, but I was raising my children and running businesses and doing the things that, you know, women do. And I think a few years ago, probably about 2014, I started to think, you know, something's not quite right with the left. And it was this sort of middle class takeover. My mother wrote once about how my mother was always suspicious about the middle class coming into the left wing movement. And she was bang on, you know, because it really, I stopped voting for the Labor Party here a few years ago. But it was when, and then I started to move towards I was interested in intellectual dark web. But then Claire Lehman came out one day and said something that was, and also Helen Pluckrose said, both, you know, really surprised me. The anti-feminist side, I've always been a feminist of sorts, not necessarily a particular kind. And she came out one day and said that feminists are always going on about rape. So I wrote something in Quillette that talked about my experience of child sexual abuse and how that is central to the fight for women, protection of women in society. And then I walked into gender critical Twitter. I met a couple of gay blokes and found me on the streets there on Twitter, and they brought me into this mess of a place. And Aidan Comerford told me that I was weaponizing my abuse against trans people, and I was tough. And thank you, Aidan.
That's right. That's what I heard. Helen, sorry, I'm only muting you because I think there's some background noise coming from there. So I'll bring you back. Just raise your hand. No. That was an extraordinary thing to say to you. So you wrote a piece about what happened to you, and I don't know how much detail you want to go into here, Edie, but if you could give us even the broad outlines and tell us what his response to that was.
Well, I guess I was talking about not just child sexual abuse, but also that I had a very close cousin who died a few years ago. I've got a genetic disease in my family. So a lot of the women I've cared for in my family are chronically ill, and most of them are dead now. But, there was years and years of being in not just vulnerable as children, but then on to being into a system where they relied on the system where female workers were essential. They're being bathed by people and all that. And so he, took me on and said, one of them even said me, the things people said to me after that really shocked me, because I these are terrible arguments. If your argument is that a raped girl and her raped cousin who's, just died, people who are, your enemies, and they're hateful people, and they're just pretending to have this vulnerability so they can attack trans people, that all of a sudden, I'm a left-leaning middle-aged woman, and that all of a sudden I've decided, right, I'm going to drag up all this childhood abuse, and I'm going to get all my family's vulnerability, and I'm going to put it out the front so that we can attack trans people. Come on, guys. Let's go and get the trans people. It's just such a bad argument, coming from a political, background. It was too much. And so, you enter.
But it's not only a bad argument; it's cruel, deliberately cruel. Let's not find a point of this. It's deliberately cruel.
I think because
I'm so sorry. It's
okay.
appalling.
I'm pretty tough, so I figure that I'd rather. I'm a bit cheeky, and I'm from a public housing estate, so I'm a bit of a street fighter. So I figure that I could be out the front, and you know what I mean. Someone's got to do it. Because a lot of women can't do it. That it's too much to be up against these fucking assholes. Sorry, I'm
You're very much there. It's not GB News.
No, it's important that you do. To be honest, I think it's important that we can.
I think it's important as well.
We can say what we want to say.
Yeah, I mean, well, anyway, let me move on to another thing. It's interesting that you say that Australia is beginning to peak, it sounds like. And it's interesting that your ban came at the same time. Do you think that that was a measure of your kind of reach? Were you getting across to more people? Were more people listening? Did you find that your own efforts were having an effect?
I think it might have been the type of people. People were. I put a little post up not so long ago about if anyone was interested in the book club, and it seems like an innocuous thing, but what we're trying to do, I've been talking to some friends, is find a feminism that is really useful to women. Women are coming in saying, look, I haven't been a feminist for a long time, because we have crazy feminists here. There've been one just featured on your little blog about, Van Batten saying nonsense. These feminists are they're speaking absolute nonsense.
Vichy feminists,
endangering women.
Yeah, I call them Vichy feminists. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Like Dennis's Vichy gays. I call them bougie feminists because they're just the bourgeoisie. They're if you put a class analysis on this stuff, and I was trying to find a place on the right or move right, because I'm from I'm a Christian woman, so I thought, well, I'll go centre, and I was trying to find a place in the centre. But now I feel like I've moved left again, because once you put a class analysis on this stuff, it's so clear that this is a bourgeois movement. And so these women I think it's the type of women, we're trying to get together and find a way for these women to use their words to express what they need. And I think Twitter's like a training ground for that. I feel like it's like a gaming platform where you enter in. We've got all the good arguments. They've got all the power. And they've got all the words. And then they keep taking one word away from us at a time. And because I like words, because I'm a writer by talent more than training, is we try and craft all the words together, what we've got left. It's like we've got a Scrabble board and we work with what we've got left and try and put our arguments. So, we were trying to help these women work out how we're going to get together and attack this thing.
That's such a brilliantly put thing. Now you also
so
you wrote,
brilliant.
yeah.
Hang on, can we just stay with that for 1 second?
Yeah.
Edie, that's an absolutely brilliant way of looking at it. That this gaming platform had never considered that before, and I've thought about how this works for a really long time, but that's never it's never occurred to me. But you're right. It's like a training ground. It's you make the arguments, you see other people's arguments, you see what works, you see what doesn't, you try, you fight for ages with just one opponent, just trying to get through. That's really clever. I think that this is something that needs even further consideration.
Indeed.
But of course,
and the idea that they have all the power and they slowly take words away,
That's
is
very
just
true.
it just seems like they're just toying with us.
Oh, I'm gonna blow all your minds. Have you ever heard of a sorry, Edie, I won't go too long into this story, but have you ever heard
No, go ahead.
Have you ever heard of a party game called Werewolf? You ever heard of that?
No.
We used to love it. Me and my family used to play it all the time. It is a fantastic game if you have about 12 people. It's amazing. What it is that everybody around the table gets a piece of paper, and on the piece of paper is written villager. That's most people, but 2 pieces of paper have werewolf written on it. And there's a nighttime and a daytime phase, and there's someone running the game. He tells everybody at the table, everyone close your eyes. And he says, 2 werewolves, now open your eyes. And the 2 werewolves open their eyes, and they look for the other werewolf. And they nod to show that they've seen each other. And then they close their eyes again. And then they pick someone to kill. They say, they silently point at someone. And then they close their eyes. And then it's the day phase. And the person who's running it says, okay, during the night, Patricia was killed. You now have to decide which one of the villagers is the werewolf, and you have to execute him by the end of the day phase. So there's a debate where people start saying, oh, I think it was him because I heard him pointing at someone like that. Now that's basically the game is over. The werewolves win if they kill all but 2 villagers. The villagers win if they kill both werewolves. Now here's the interesting part. The werewolves usually win, because the whole thing was invented as an experiment. It was originally called Mafia, and the whole thing was invented as an experiment to show that an uninformed majority would always lose against an informed minority. And time again, the werewolves win. And that, it seems to me, is what is happening. We have an uninformed majority who are losing a battle against an informed minority.
Yeah, so they have the advantage. Yeah.
Yes. And it seems to me that Twitter trying to ban people and stuff, and what you were just saying about taking the words away, taking the Scrabble pieces away, it's part of the same thing. And one of the interesting things, like basically, I think it was Jane Clare Jones who said that, Twitter became an absolutely indispensable thing for feminists at one point. It was a huge resource. And she, I think, says that they saw that this was happening and they thought, oh, fuck that.
Yeah. You can see it like every time somebody starts to gain ground on Twitter and starts to shift the needle and starts to influence voice, to influence opinion, they have to be shut down. If a word suddenly takes root, like the word groomer, there's so much grooming going on in this movement. Well, we just have to take that word away. Yeah. Everything is just like they know that they're losing, but they just know that they can change the rules every time our side, the side of right, figures something out.
All you have to do is report somebody, and you go through the Twitter reporting. Now, I don't report very many people because I only report for extreme insults or threats of violence. But you have to go through it to see how skewed it is. It's, are you being targeted for your identity? And there's so much, and it talks about, are you being targeted for your gender? And then it says, gender isn't necessarily what you're assigned at birth. And it is so skewed.
Yes,
and even if somebody, like people do to me all the time, use your image in a horrible way, if you report that, you then have to go through all sorts of hoops to put your fucking, scan your driver's license, for Christ's sake, with your photo.
Do you know what it reminds me? Do you know what it reminds me sometimes? There used to be, I think it was during Jim Crow times, there used to be a test that was handed out to black people to see if they were eligible to vote. and the test was like about 50 questions that said things like, count the zeros in this sentence. If there are more than 1,000, then take away 3. That type of nonsense question.
Wow.
So that people couldn't answer it and they couldn't vote.
Yeah.
And it's a similar thing again. It's like the Twitter complaints process is basically telling people that if you believe in reality, then this is not the place for you. This is not.
Yeah, and making you show your identification. You know, like the people who are vulnerable are the ones who can't show their identification to Twitter when Twitter is the hostile enemy. It's really terrible. But you mentioned the class analysis. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, you carry on, Artie.
I just wanted to mention you were talking about bringing class analysis into this, and I think that's really important too. I grew up very working class, very poor, in a working class town, and as a gay person, I've always felt that gay culture had a lot of working class attitude to it, had a working class element to it, and people come from all walks of life and all socioeconomic strata who are same-sex attracted. But when you're involved in gay culture, you're so alienated from society, or you were historically. It was very much a working class kind of thing. In London, you were associated with, street muggers and gangs and things like that. That what's that language, Polari, that was used in gay culture. It was very working class. You were. It was a counterculture. It was outside of the norm, which is very much, very, very not middle class. So when you say that your feminism, your identity with feminism and with the left was upset by the middle class intrusion on it, I think you could argue the same thing about what gay men, gay women, and bisexual people are feeling. There's something like that going on with the bourgeoisification of gay culture. And you seem to have had your real finger on that pulse for a long time. I don't think you're same-sex attracted, as far as I know, but you've been very friendly to gay people and to gay men specifically. I think the first time I read about myself in a news article was from you. Didn't you write about me like 2 years ago or something like that?
Yeah. I don't know why. And, Dennis Kavanagh calls it my unlikely gay male following. And I've certainly had a little bit of, and I'm an evangelical Christian. I've been married for 30 years, and I've had a little bit of pushback from some of the femmes on it as well. But I don't know why. I've made friendships. And I grew up, I wrote it in The Critic about I lost a gay cousin when I was 17. He committed suicide. And, I just loved him, and it really broke my heart. We grew up together, and I saw his struggles in life as well. I saw how he really struggled to come to terms. He lived in the country, and he used to come into the city. Gay guys are more happy in the city generally. Yeah. He lived with us quite a lot. We lived in a public housing estate, and it was very bogan, and he was pretty well dressed and, smart, and just someone who had more of an influence on my life than I thought. I think when you get to kind of your 50s, you realize what has really profoundly influenced your life. You think that you can create your own life, but actually you are very, very heavily influenced by your socioeconomic status, who you grew up with, your parents. So, when you said I think one of the things that you said a while ago really impacted me. You said that the gay community need conservatives. And I thought that was interesting because I'm not a conservative, but I've, in my little community, there's quite a lot of conservatives. And the way that they push back, and the gay men and women had to make good arguments. They had to say, they used to have to use liberal democracy and use that argument to find their place in society. And of course, they have. And now all their cultural capital has been taken by these massive organisations, which is what pisses me off about the lesbian women as well, is that these people are oppressing the lesbian people with their own cultural capital, with their own goodwill from they claim all the goodwill in society that's towards lesbians, the lesbians that we love in our lives. They take all that and wield it against these women, and it's it makes me so angry. So I had to, my writing, and people say that to me, they can hear the undercurrent. It's not hate that you're hearing, darling. It's anger.
Yeah.
I'm pissed off.
That's right.
I have to say, Edie, one of the best things about this for me is that it's destroyed for me any tribalism I've ever had, including, any kind of religious. Like, I used to be a card-carrying atheist, and I kind of feel embarrassed about all that now. It feels so beside the point. I found one of the great things about this is that I've made so many friends across the political spectrum. I know I have friends in every political party now in the UK, and I meet people like yourself who I never would have imagined having something in common with about 3 or 4 years ago. So it's great in a way. I mean, it's terrible. We keep getting banned and we keep getting chased from venue to venue, like some kind of evil Beatles. But I won't be able to use that joke for much longer. But you have to say it is overall. I think it's just wonderful that we've all met each other. Look at the 4 of us from different parts of the globe, and
Edie, can I ask? I mean, I know Australia has kind of gone the way of Canada to an extent, where it completely sort of captured, it seems, the stories that you hear. But there's obviously a massive undercurrent and a pushback. Do you see this happening? Is there?
Yeah. What form does it take?
Has society in Australia, have they sort of now woken up to kind of what's going on? Is there a pushback happening?
I think so, and we've got to work with what we've got, right? We've got to work with the culture that we're in, and Australians are a little bit cheeky. I mean, I never thought Canada would fall as far as it had, because Canadians are nice people. I've been to Canada; they remind me of ourselves. In a sense, they're very relaxed people, much more than Americans, who, culturally a little bit more, politically a bit more uptight. But I can hear, listening to the Aussie women, and I was really enjoying that on Spaces too, because you hear them, and there's just something underneath it that's saying, well, they can fuck off with this stuff. It's just like, we're done, and we're trying to tune into that sort of vibe with the Australian women as well. Because they're coming in and they're saying, first thing they say is, oh, you don't hate gay people, you don't hate trans people. No, but you're allowed to. There was one woman in the Spaces, and she's become part of our network, and she came in sort of gently saying, oh, there's a trans woman, and she was using she pronouns, and it was just sort of gingerly, because I don't want to say the wrong thing. There's such a cultural environment of control. Australia is from a left-wing background. Because of that, we have big government. And so the reach of ACON here, which is our Stonewall, is massive. And it became massive before most of us even noticed.
Yeah.
And so the capture of our institutions is very strong, but also I think we're going to have to go with the culture of the people, that sort of, the Australian sort of rebellion.
That's the difference between Canadians and Australians. I think there is a lot that we have in common, Aussies and Aussies and Canucks. But the one big difference is that I think Australians are a lot more rebellious than Canadians are. I don't want to typify Canadians as one big Borg. There are many different kinds of Canadians. We have bogans, we have hosers, we have a lot of that working class kind of attitude too.
Norm Macdonald.
Self-deprecation is a big Canadian trait. We like our humor. We like our self-deprecating humor. That could play into this. But I'm not surprised that Australians are first to be rebelling against this, and that Canadians are probably going to be last, because we have that real sense of being polite and proper that really always comes first and foremost to Canadians. And if anything, we will rebel against this in our self-deprecating way by making polite little jokes about it, but always still keeping our place in line and never misgendering, And whereas Aussies are very much more boisterous.
Very English.
Yes.
What are the media? Are the media beginning to report on this in Australia?
Well, they're very captured. ABC is a paid-up member of ACON, as is SBS. Both of them, we've got a coordinated group of women who are making complaints. One complaint we put through to SBS was acknowledged. We have a sense ACON are having some sort of break from their little campaign. So we get a sense that they might be starting to trying to re-strategize after all the Stonewall stuff. The UK
realizing there's a fight coming
to the UK, obviously. Maybe the difference with Canada and Australia is that Canada was probably more of a middle class country, and Australia obviously was convict. My ancestors are convict. My father was a Cockney, but my mother's ancestors were convicts. So maybe that's got thing.
That's
we've
a good
got
point.
these,
Canada's loyalist. Canada is American immigrants who went north of the border out of loyalty to the crown during the War of Independence. So we're like very British, proper. Sorry, go on. Yeah,
that's right. And Americans are very conservative, I find, really. Apart from all this craziness that's taken over America, generally they seem to be a reasonably conservative sort of people in their own life.
Well, it is a form of conservatism.
Yeah, we have that fair go thing. We're trying to get into that as well. We got this idea of this working class fair go, and this is not fair. Of all the things this shit is, fair is not one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you mentioned. I was always surprised that Australia fell even a little bit. I thought the ability to call a spade in Australia, I would have thought would be unmatched in the rest of the world.
That's right.
I found it so, in fact, almost a little disturbing, because I thought, gosh, if it can take hold in Australia, it can take hold anywhere, But maybe I know there's some country. I know Australia also has a reputation for being somewhat macho, and I know there's some countries that have embraced it that are very male dominated, I think.
That's right, it's very sexist, I think. Australia's very misogynistic. I probably realize that more now. Like, I used to think that when I was younger, then you become more conservative a bit as I was a socialist party when I was at uni. So then you become more conservative. I become Christian. So I sort of that tapered out, even though I was still left wing. But you do, I do think that, the thing with Australia is that we have that left. We have the Labor Party here was very strong. And when it became kind of middle class, it was when I worked in government, it was in the institutions. When I did my degree, my honours thesis was called Policing Culture. And it was about the way we could use Foucault's theories. This was 30 years ago, to control culture as a strategy to manage urban populations. Sorry?
Like the panopticon and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, it was more his theories of governmentality. So, I mean, that stuff was coming into our institutions 30 years ago. So that's a long time. And, so I just think it's institutional capture rather than it's not a groundswell. But there is when we've been doing protests in the streets, and almost all the guys who go, they're all men, what about the trans women? And you think, if bloody women could find a little inch of the solidarity those men have with each other, we have this one.
It's so
that
true.
is interesting.
That's very, very true. Hey, listen, we're coming up to an hour. But Edie, if there's ever anything I can do to help get anything out there, if everyone else rejects you, which I don't rejects the piece by you, which I don't think will happen, but please do and send me anything you like.
Thank you. That's very kind.
And I'm hoping that I'm hoping that you're appealing your Twitter ban and that you just continue to do so.
I appeal every day, and I send them a little video, or I send them a little bit of special information that they might need.
Excellent.
They're unmoved by my appeals.
I did it for 3 months. 3 months. To use them as a word concession.
You're the hero of appealing. Yes. I do want to say before I go, my friend Kit Kowalski. Kit does a lot of good research here on ACON. And I have set up a website where we're setting up a book club, and we're trying to get all the Aussie women together. We've called it, I'm not going to forget right now, we've called it Sheila Shed. Sheila is a very Australian name for a girl. For a woman.
Yeah.
We've called it SheilaShed.com. So
Great.
come along
Well,
and
Any
meet with
links?
our
We
book club.
put the links underneath the video.
We put the
anyway.
links underneath, Edie. So if you send
Perfect.
anything you'd like to Jen, she'll be able to.
Okay.
To
Well, we're
to
going to have a
add them to-
revolution, a women's
Yeah,
revolution in Australia.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So
Wow.
join us.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, you've
And
got
listen-
with Catherine Deves and Holly Lawford Smith and you and so many other amazing Australian women and some men too, like Bernard Lang, carrying their weight. There's great
Oh, we've
stuff
got a
going
couple
on
of
down
great
there.
gay guys coming up too. You know,
Oh, good.
the gay guys are peaking here. We've got a couple of, you know, really solid guys.
Great.
Excellent.
Well,
Excellent.
let us know if any of them want to get on here and have a chat at some point.
Yeah,
Thank you.
some
We
handsome
appreciate
Aussie
your support, guys. We
boys.
really do.
Yeah.
Well, listen,
Edie, it was
I
brilliant
appreciate.
to talk to
Yeah,
you. Really, it was really interesting. You've got some very interesting things to say. I've
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed this.
yeah, it's
Thank you.
wonderful to chat with you. You really have a broad perspective on all of politics, which is so refreshing and beautiful. And to give you a chance to thank you for the kind words you wrote about me so early on in this.
Aw.
You know,
Thanks, Sadie. I love you all. Love yous all, as the Aussies would say.
Thanks, Edie. And
Yes.
we'll see you next time. As you say, if there's anything you want to promote or anything like that, just let us know.
Cheers. Thanks for that. Appreciate it. Bye-bye, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Well, that was lovely, as
Oh,
always.
Yeah, that
so
was-
lovely. I love that we're
was
all like
amazing.
in different time zones. She's
Yeah.
she's in Tuesday already. She's in the future. She's the girl from tomorrow.
Yeah, that was excellent. But it was also really nice to see you guys again. Really, this was lovely.
Well, we should do an hour-long one at some point as well. I mean, you know, for just for because
for old time's sake, maybe next week we'll sort it out. Let's find a date.
It keeps happening, doesn't it? We keep getting news stories, so I don't think there'll be any lack of things to talk about.
I know our schedule now is basically if a news story comes up, we do a mess, but a news story comes up just about as regularly as a mess normally comes up. So it's
Yeah. Oh, hey, listen. Also, I remember to say it this time, but please like this video because apparently that's good. Apparently, it does good things.
Yes, like and subscribe.
I don't really know why, but please do like it. Thank you very much, everyone. Lovely to see you and to talk to you all. We will see you very soon.
Yes, thanks everyone. Bye, guys.